Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I want to thank you for taking your valuable time to be here tonight. I'm sorry you've got nothing better to do. We're going live on YouTube tonight. I'm joined today by my assistant, Nikki Sakic from Illinois. She's going to help me ask questions and monitor the board. And I have Desta Barnaby, who's the producer in the background. And my guest tonight is someone I wanted to talk to for quite a while since I heard his story. I've listened to a number of interviews he's done. And my guest tonight is Terry Lovelace, who has written a book called Incident at Devil's Den. And this is a fascinating story. I was just saying to Terry that I would like to have a panel with the 6 most fascinating experiencer stories that I'm aware of. And I deal with basically experiencers, and Terry's is one of the stories that I would like everybody to know about. So that's why I wanted to get him out there, and he wanted to do an interview. So Terry Lovelace is a 6-year veteran of the United States Air Force. He served honorably from 1973 to 1979. He has an undergraduate degree in psychology from Park University and a law degree from Western Michigan. He has been admitted to the bar in Michigan, American Samoa, and the state of Vermont. Terry began his legal career in private practice in Michigan before becoming a civil servant. In American Samoa, he served as an assistant attorney general and general counsel for the LBJ Tropical Medical Center. In 2007, he was elected by his peers as the president of the American Samoa Bar Association for a 1-year term. He also prosecuted criminal felony cases for the territory for 2 years. In Vermont, he served as an assistant attorney general for their board of medical practice until his retirement in 2012. He resides in Dallas with his wife and their adult children. Good evening, Terry, and thank you so much for coming and being willing to share with me your story.
Well, thanks very much for the kind introduction. It's nice to be here. Beautiful.
Yeah, yours is, as I point out to people, this is a story people should know. So let's go through, we've got some photographs and I've got some questions that I want to get to you, but let's go through your story because it is a story that takes a little while to go through, and then we're going to show the photographs. So let's start from you're very, very young. And as you probably know, experiencer stories are sort of like, we call them lifers. It sort of goes through your entire life. It's not one type of event. So let's start where it first starts when you're a young kid and the first UFO sighting that you have.
The first UFO sighting I had was at age 8, 1963. I was in my backyard. I had an uncle who gave me an adult bow and arrow set. Okay. And I'd never give my kid anything as lethal as that at 8, but it was a different time, I guess. I lived in South St. Louis City. Busy neighborhood, beautiful day. It was in May, lots of people outside, women hanging up laundry and talking, and kids and dogs and cats and cars, and the usual sounds.
This is Michigan, right? This is in Michigan?
No, this was, I'm sorry, let me back up. This was in originally I was born in St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I was there until 1973 when I joined the military.
Okay, okay.
So
that's about an hour from me.
Where are you at?
I live in Hillsboro, Illinois.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I can get to, well, East St. Louis is about 54 miles away from me, but I go down there to Cahokia Mounds and skywatch around that area. So
yeah, I've been down to Cahokia Mounds. It's an interesting place. My son and I walked through a cornfield out there and picked up about 24 arrowheads and flint.
Yep.
Very interesting. So,
yep. My son and I find them around here too all the time. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm loading an arrow in the notch of this bowstring. I'm looking down. And as I'm looking down, I saw a round shadow move across me from in back of me to in front of me, perfectly round. And of course, I looked up and there was a flying disc right over my head. I'd say maybe 50 feet.
Wow.
So it's low. I mean, it's close to me. And it was a really weird experience in that there was a distinct auditory change. All the noises of the neighborhood that I were hearing were muffled. I mean, it sounded to me like I had my hands pressed against my ears.
Yeah.
So it was a strange sensation. And I remember being struck by it as I thought it was gorgeous. I thought it was just absolutely beautiful. I mean, kind of in a way like a new sports car is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I had the oddest compulsion to lie down on the ground and look up at it. And that makes no sense. That makes no sense. But that's what I did. And I don't know how long I watched it. A couple of minutes is what I believe. And then it kind of did a list to starboard to clear the power lines and shot off and was gone.
Let me ask you a question at this point, because this is what, 1963, 64, somewhere in there?
63, May
Yeah,
63.
So we don't really know yet about alien abduction type stuff. So we could concede that you may have had some experience other than just seeing a UFO. Because my first experience was in 75, and I'll get to this later, where when I saw it the first night, it flew right in front of the car. The second night, it came right at us. And as it was flying away, I had this impression like, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. And that would be your experience. It was like, it was there, and then it just sort of it wanted you to see it, and then it just sort of disappears.
Yeah, and you know, I don't remember. I have no memory of lying on the ground. So I wonder, I mean, I remember being on the ground, I remember standing, but I don't remember lying down on the ground.
Wow.
I wonder if maybe they dropped me. I don't know.
Yeah. You've never done regression, correct? To go back and revisit all this stuff?
I've not. I've talked to Yvonne Smith. I'm a friend of Kathleen Martin, so we've talked about it. But I've not done that yet. I think I'm finally ready to do that.
That would be interesting. Okay, go ahead. So that's your first experience. And then you have one a few years later, correct?
Correct. I was age 11, 1966. It was January. It was bitterly cold. Evening before I'd watched, you know, nothing spooky on television or any of the sort. Usual night in all regards. My mom put me to bed, you know, say goodnight. I lived in the second floor of a 2-story brick building. Again, that's the same house, downtown, pardon me, South St. Louis City.
Okay.
And I was in bed and I was asleep, and I saw these flashing lights, and they were yellow and green and white. And the white in particular were very bright. And it woke me up, and I could also hear like a droning noise, I call it, kind of like a bass tone. It was more powerful than it was loud, actually. And I assumed this was a fire truck. So I hop out of bed, and I pulled back my curtains. It was an old drafty house. We had thick curtains, Venetian blinds. I pulled back the curtain and peeked through the blind, and there's another saucer. I mean, and I remember feeling just absolutely thrilled that now I get to see the top of the thing, because before all I could see was the underneath. You know, and it was also special to me in that I felt like they were coming back to see me, that this just wasn't a one-on, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't a wrong turn at Albuquerque. They were there with purpose.
Okay.
And I felt very smug about that, you know? And I thought, you know, most people spend a lifetime and never see anything. I'm 11 and I've seen it twice. But I never said a word about this one after my experience at age 8. That
Your parents weren't buying it, right?
they wanted no part of it. No, they were afraid that the neighbors would, you know, think there's something wrong with me, something wrong with them. So,
What about brothers and sisters? Did you have any brothers and sisters that were involved, or?
I did. I had 2 older sisters that had the bedroom directly across the hall from me. And I had a problem with what my parents thought were nightmares. I don't think they were nightmares at all. I think I was being visited by 4 little circus monkeys.
Wow.
And, you know, I had a cousin in Jonesboro, Arkansas, you know, half a state away, who at around the same time was reporting these 3-foot-high circus clowns that would visit him in the middle of the night.
Wow.
So kind of keeping with a theme, I guess.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know.
So the dreams were just the beings coming? Was there anything, any other sort of part to the story, or just the beings being there?
Well, yeah, there's kind of a part to the story, and that was that my bed was against the wall in a corner, and they would form a semicircle around my bed.
Okay.
The one closest to my head always spoke to me and always spoke to me telepathically. I heard him in my head with crystal clarity.
Wow.
And it would ask, you want to come with us? Why don't you come with us? It was an invitation.
Wow.
I'm sure they could have taken me. Maybe they did before. I don't know. But sometimes I'd get scared and I'd scream for my parents. And
Wow.
you know, then they would disappear in the swirl of shadows. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I saw.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. Yep. And your sisters, did they have any experiences, or did you have? The other question would be related to that is a lot of times you get poltergeist activity in around the experiences where people don't think it's related, but if you're an experiencer, you talk to enough experiences, you know that there's this other stuff going on as well.
Yes, I don't remember poltergeistish type activity in the house back then, although there sure could have been.
Yeah.
I had it, recently, but within the past couple of years.
Wow.
So.
And your sisters, did they experience anything, or did you tell them about it?
Well, they knew about it because I screamed my head off in the middle of the night, and woke everyone up.
Okay.
And and they were justifiably a little bit, upset with me, but I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
They didn't want to talk about it. Even as adults, they did not want to talk about it. When I wrote this book, neither one of them wanted to discuss it. Neither one of them wanted to read the book. The only comment my one sister made was, I regret that we couldn't have been of more help to you when the lights would shine through the windows and we couldn't find you in the house.
I think that's pretty common. I think it's like a lot of experiencers come to me and say, they're sort of upset that their other half doesn't believe it, or their kids, like my kid, has nothing to do with it. And I say, get used to it. I think that's the pattern. That you don't have any support for whatever reason, that people don't want anything to do with around you. Yeah.
I have 2 adult children. They're both scientists. One's 40, one's 34. And they love me as dad, but they're not buying it. If it can't be peer reviewed, it's not.
I remember you telling about the 11 thing where you thought it was sort of a dream until the next morning. So tell that story.
Yeah, you talk about at age 11?
Yeah, the one with the blind thing, with the curtain.
Yeah. What I did was, as I'm looking at this thing, and I'm just spellbound by looking at it, and I took the curtain and I tucked it into the slats of the Venetian blind, so I could sit there and not have to hold the stuff apart, so I could see. Mm-hmm. And I watched for a while, and then I felt suddenly disinterested. Not apathetic, but close.
Yeah. And
I turned around and went back to bed.
Wow.
Woke up the next morning. I did not remember it. First thing, I woke up, and then as soon as I saw the window and that curtain tucked in, it came flooding back, and I knew that it happened.
That's one of the things I noticed with your story, that you had it twice. Where if you've ever watched Mike Clelland's story, or a number of experiences where they'll report a being is standing at the end of the bed, and then you ask them, "What did you do?" I pulled the covers over my head and went to sleep. And it's like, you did that? And you had that experience where it doesn't make any sense that you would just stop watching and then go to bed. Or when you're on board they had the craft thing where with the tent, where you go into the tent, you just, okay, we're going to bed. And this whole thing is going on. It doesn't make any sense.
No, doesn't. Doesn't.
Beautiful.
I could, if we go chronologically, in 1987, I had a 2-hour episode of missing time while on a motorcycle ride.
Wow, I haven't heard this.
Yeah, it was my habit. I only rode my motorcycle 3 months out of the year in autumn in Michigan.
Okay.
Because it was beautiful. I enjoyed it, and we had a routine. I'd ride on Sunday morning. I'd always be home between 10:30 and 10:45. I mean, I'm known for being prompt.
Yeah.
And I went for my ride, and I stayed on pavement. I never took my bike on gravel, and I was on a paved road, and I was approaching a turn, and I was throttling back from about 80 to about 65.
Yeah.
And then seamlessly, absolutely seamlessly, I'm on a gravel farm road, doing 30 miles an hour.
Wow.
And I blamed it on myself being absent-minded, because it was the only explanation I could think of. So I had to park the bike And I assumed if I came in this way, if I turn around, it'll get me back from where I came from, and it did.
Yeah.
And I went home, and my wife was hysterical. I was 2 hours late getting home.
So this is 87. So by then, Whitley Strieber's written the book Communion. Did you know about missing time and the fact that you may be dealing with something where you're being taken, or was it still a mystery to you in 87?
In 87 was kind of the year that that I got clued in. I purposefully, my wife and I both avoided the topic. You know, we didn't watch science fiction. She liked to watch Star Trek. I'd leave the room, but you know, I still haven't seen Independence Day. You know, it upsets my sleep. It does. So when I had this missing time episode, my wife had a Life magazine article that she'd saved from 1963, I believe,
Wow.
on Betty and Barney Hill.
Wow.
So she thought about that 2 days after the fact when she had calmed down, and showed them to me and asked me, could this be, you know, the reason that you're late? Could you have run into something, you know?
Wow. Did you see the Communion book at that time? Did you see the cover or anything like that? And how did you react? Because a lot of people will talk about the fact they dropped to their knees. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, and it triggered memories and stuff.
I was in a mall, Christmas shopping, and I include this in the book.
Wow.
I walked into a discount bookstore,
Okay.
a big chain, and there in the end cap was Whitley's book. And I saw it, and I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
And we had to leave the mall.
Wow. It's almost like that's a trigger event. Like I always say to people, if you want to go to Amazon.com, go to Communion, and then read the comments, and people will tell the same story you're telling. When I saw that book, it's like, it's almost like it was intentionally put on there to trigger people to remember.
You know, I got to spend some time with Whitley last June when we were at the Consciousness Conference in Pine Ridge, South Dakota.
Okay.
And a very interesting experience there. And I asked Whitley, I said, what made you choose this image for the cover of your book?
Well, good. That's what I wanted to ask him. What did he say?
That's what they look like.
Wow. Because you know the story that his wife was channeling. He was going to call it body pain. And his wife was channeling in the middle of the night. No, we shall not call it that. We shall call it Communion, because that's what it is. And that's why he changed the name of the book.
Yes.
Wow.
We talked about that, discussed Annie at length.
So he picked the photo because that's what they looked like. But did he get told to put the photo on the cover? Or did you ask about that?
I think it's artwork, but it was artwork, I understand, done with his direction.
Yeah, see, I was wondering why he chose, it's almost like because it's not so much the name or whatever, it's the photo that triggers. It's almost like I was wondering whether he got the idea, put this photo on the cover, because that's what happened with the title, but I never clarified whether the photo he got told by some sort of impression or message to put the thing. But I'm glad you thought. What did he think of your story? Did you tell him your whole story? And what did he think of what was going on?
I did. We presented while we were there. There were maybe 9 of us or so, and yeah, he had as many questions for me as I had for him.
There you go.
I don't know. I think Whitley's a mystic, and I should probably have way more questions for him. But
yeah, it'd be honor to talk to him. I mean, he's quite the sort of like the forerunner of the whole thing.
And he is. You know, Rice University in Texas. The head of the humanities department is Professor Jeffrey Kripal.
Kripal, yeah.
And Jeff has co-authored half a dozen books with Whitley. Yeah. And he invited myself and Leslie Kane to speak last November at the university. And we spoke just to faculty members of the humanities department and PhD candidates, no press and no public.
Wow.
And we were very well received. I spoke on UFOs, or pardon me, I spoke on abductions, and Leslie spoke on UFOs, of course. And I met Jeff Kripal. It was just a fascinating event. They have all of the letters, 200,000 pieces of mail that he received.
Oh, yeah.
And received. They are in the process of, anyway, categorizing them, cataloging them, and they're going to be available for public access and review.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me ask you a question on that, because I think Paula Harris's material is going to Rice University, and so is Jacques Vallée's material. So
Yes.
you mentioned the fact that when you die, you have these implants, which we'll get into a little bit later, that you want them taken out when you die. Have you got where you're going to send that? Is that to Rice, or what are you planning to do with the implant? Who's going to be analyzing this?
That's, I thought I had that worked out.
Okay.
And I don't want to name names, but I wasn't sure after I did this in my will that it would be done properly. So we're redoing that.
Okay. But Rice is a key place that people should realize. Rice University, because of Kripal, they have a pretty, like an interest where they're not laughing at it. They're taking it seriously there.
They sure took us seriously.
Yeah. Wonderful. So let's get back to your story. So you have the 11-year-old thing, and then we move to your Air Force days. So you go to the Air Force, you go to Michigan, and then you have the major event, right?
Yes. Actually, I was assigned to Whiteman Air Force Base, which is in rural Missouri,
Okay.
about 50 miles from Kansas City. Back then it was in the middle of nowhere. It was a SAC base. They had nuclear-armed B-52s and a squadron of Minutemen II ICBMs scattered out all over the farmland.
Yeah.
I was a medic and an EMT, so I worked in the emergency room as a first responder. And my partner at work was a guy named, I refer to him as Tobias. And Toby and I were best of friends. And our wives were both married young. Our wives were best of friends. And he came to me one night and he says, "Hey man, I got an idea. Let's go camping." And I kind of scoffed at it. And I said, "Look, man, I've never been camping in my life. And I suspect, you're from Flint. I suspect you've never been camping. And where did this idea come from?" And
This is 77, correct?
1977, yes.
Okay, but you have an incident before then at Whiteman, which I'd like to go through, because you have the experience in 75. My experience started in 75. Mine deals with nuclear weapons, and yours deals with nuclear weapons. So I want to go through that 75 story, because you had and then you had a bunch of testimony that people were giving you. And so let's go through that story. And then I want to ask you about your conversations with Robert Hastings about this whole nuclear issue. What do you think about that? So let's do the 75 story first. Yours is in January. My sighting is in May. And I'll just give you the background on mine. I'm right on the Canadian border. Okay, and so we have the Minot missile base and the Grand Forks missile base. And the UFOs are coming in over the border. And we had this town that had this flap for a year, went on for a whole year. And I went to the guy who ran the airport at the small town. And I said, "Bob, why were they coming?" And he said, "You know why they're coming?" And I said, "No, 30 years, I have no idea why they picked this little tiny town in the middle of nowhere." He said, "Because of the nuclear missiles." I told you that. And what they had done in 75 is they had put in the only anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational in the United States was in Tacoma, North Dakota. And they'd put in 100 nuclear missiles to try to shoot the Russians down before they had the Star Wars thing. And so there was this connection. So when I heard your story of 1975 and the nukes, I went, "Whoa, this is pretty cool." So tell that story about the 75 incident.
Yeah, sure will. We got a call one night, late after midnight sometime, and Toby took the call, and it was to a missile silo I refer to as Kilo 5. They were all named and numbered like that. That was how they were labeled. And it was about maybe 12 miles from the base, out in the middle of soybean fields. So I warmed up, bitter night, cold, very cold. I warmed up the ambulance, and Toby did the paperwork and the checklist thing, and then ran out, and we hopped in the car and took off. And it was an odd thing in that the only information that we had was a missile technician had fallen, and they think maybe may have broken ankle. But they were very uncharacteristically light on details.
Okay.
And when we got near the missile silo, the LCF, Launch Control Facility, we could see on the horizon this orange glow. And I'm like, what is that? And what it was there were probably a dozen security police vehicles there with their engines running. And there's this huge cloud of carbon monoxide gas that was, and all the cars had their yellow flashers on from their overheads.
Okay.
So there's this big pulsing cloud, moving out of sync. It was very strange. So,
Wow.
And he had a guard across the road, and he let us through. And I asked him, "Hey man, what's going on?" Because I normally don't see that kind of response. And he says, "Beats me, man. They just put me out here." So,
Wow.
so we drove in, and there was a captain in the middle of the road, and he was talking on a radio, and he was agitated. And he told me, I rolled my window down, and he says, "Your man's walking and talking. He's okay. But nobody goes in until I authorize it. Park over there and stay in your ambulance and stay off the radio."
Okay.
Okay. So we did that for about 5 minutes. And my friend Toby, who was,
Curious.
impulse control issues. He says, "Man, I got to check this out. I want to see what's going on." So he grabbed the parka and hopped out of the ambulance. And he's gone maybe 5-6 minutes. He opens the door and he's excited. That was unusual to see Toby excited. But he opened the door and he grabbed me by my shirt and is pulling me out of the ambulance. Says, "Man, you have got to see this. You ain't never seen nothing like this." And he's pulling me out of the ambulance. I grab my parka and I come out. And here we're standing next to this captain who told us to stay in the ambulance. And he and Toby are looking up. And I looked up and I saw this. It was about the size of a full-size van.
Okay.
And I called it a black diamond because it had all these facets to it. It was shaped a little bit like the thing in Rendlesham that I've seen pictures of.
So you must have been pretty close if you knew the size. You must have been pretty close to it.
We were right there. I mean, it was hovering over the cap that was over the launch tube.
Okay.
That's where it was.
Wow.
And so we're watching it, and the thing just took off, like from 0 to 500 miles in a second, and is gone. And we're all looking at each other like, "Wow, did you see what I saw?" And so he kind of shakes it off and takes control again and says, "All right, you can go in and get your man now."
But you don't believe this. You don't believe this is, you still haven't caught on. You've had 2 dramatic UFO sightings, but you don't tie it into UFOs, correct?
Correct. Well, at 22, I was 20 then, 20 years of age.
Okay.
And I thought I was an expert on UFOs because I'd seen 2, one at 8 and one at 11. They were saucers. This wasn't a saucer, ergo it was something else. Yeah. And we got back to the base, and the hospital commander called us in, and he took my ambulance report, and he made a couple photocopies, and he redacted the times. Everything else he left, but he redacted the times that we responded and time we got back, and everything relevant. So I don't know what that was all about. And then
but you asked him about it, didn't you? Didn't you make some comment? You asked him about what was this?
Sure, we were both eager, like, what is this? What is this? And he says, "Boys, I got to tell you, that's a prototype helicopter, and it's secret. So you can't run your mouths about it. You can't talk about it. You understand?" And we're like, "Okay, sure." And we told everybody we knew. Everybody that listened, we told.
And other people were talking, correct? You got other people who were giving you sort of secondhand information that this was not a one-time occurrence.
I did. We knew some security policemen because as first responders, we got to know those guys.
Yeah.
And this was a little atypical. The things that they usually saw were orange glowing rings. Now, I never saw this, but this is hearsay from the security police. These orange glowing rings used to hang around the bunker where they stored the nukes, and would occasionally shine a laser down into the bunker, and then be gone.
That's the Rendlesham Forest story. And it wasn't one or two guys. I think you said at one time it was like 11 or something people that had told you this sort of story. It wasn't one or two guys that told you this.
No, we heard that from multiple people.
Yeah. And that's exactly the story that you hear, this rumored story about Rendlesham, where they go over the nukes and they shoot the beam down. And of course, everybody's backing off the story. No, that didn't happen and stuff. It's almost an identical story. So when you talk to Robert Hastings, you probably know Robert Hastings has now come out as an experiencer, that he's dealt with these beings his whole life. Were you in his documentary, or what was the discussion you had with him, and what did he think about your case? Was it just standard, or did he have anything to back up your case?
He interviewed me at length about everything that happened, my entire story, which took probably 4 hours to go into detail.
And we should mention for people that Robert Hastings wrote the book UFOs and Nukes, the connection between the UFOs and nuclear weapons.
Yes, and his latest book is called Confessions, written with, co-authored with David Jacobs.
Yeah.
And he included my story in his book
Good.
Because he thought it was relevant and thought it was genuine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've talked to Robert Hastings, got all the respect from him in the world. The guy's very knowledgeable, and you know, it's just curious that he's an experiencer too. Yeah.
Was there any other cases? Like you said, you got 1,200 letters from various people after you published your book. Was there anybody else that came with nuclear stories, or from Whiteman Air Force Base, or anything that sort of tied into that? Because that seems to be a key element that, you know, people are talking about the threat thing, and, you know, that this is a key element, is this connection between the nukes and the UFOs.
Yes, yes. Well, now it's 1,340 letters as of this morning.
Wow.
I'm taking a core of about 200 of them that are just really fascinating, just really good stories from people, and de-identifying them and including the facts in a book. That's going to be a book that I hope to publish in a month, if everything goes as planned.
Beautiful, beautiful.
But,
and then you'll put in Rice University all the letters when you're dead, right?
I will. That's a great idea. Jeff will have
things, I have the same thing. People don't realize you get a lot of these stories that, like I'm doing Stanton Friedman's files right now, and that's what I'm looking for, is these gems, because you don't have time to tell about every story, and people swear you to secrecy or whatever. But when you're dead, I mean, a lot of this stuff leaks out, and then you go like, wow, I mean, I didn't know this existed, these stories. So you've got a lot of people that are reacting to your story and basically supporting what you maintained through your story, correct?
That's correct. I've had very few skeptics. You know, I've had some people that, you know, were skeptical and had doubts, and that's fine. I think people should be skeptical. But you know, what amazed me is the number of experiencers out there that I see, that my book seemed to resonate with on some level. They wrote me and told me that it reminded them of what they saw when they were children. And I've got, you know, people that told me they saw owls, lots of owls, raccoons, deer, glowing orbs, Disney characters. I mean,
did you have any of that? The owls or the deers or the synchronicities or that kind of stuff?
And a lot of synchronicities. The beings I saw were the monkeys. That's what I saw.
Okay. That's as a kid, but when you were on board the ship, they weren't monkeys anymore, right?
They weren't monkeys anymore. You know, the mask was off.
Okay. At least we think the mask is off. I mean, you never know what you're actually seeing, because they can sort of screen images of whatever they want. So it's interesting. So that's the 75 story, the nuke thing, which I think is pretty important because it backs up the story of my involvement, and it covers a key part that most people really don't realize, that there is this connection. And it's not like, you know, rumored stories. These are people like you who are there, or military people, or launch officers and stuff like this. There's a lot of supporting evidence for the fact that there's this. In fact, you talk about 75. I don't know if you've seen the NORAD documents that were leaked out at the time. 1975, all the we had ours in 75, and Loring Air Force Base, Worth Smith Air Force Base, Minot Air Force Base, and Malmstrom, all along the Canadian border. The NORAD documents leaked out that they had the UFOs inside the weapon storage areas there, and those were all SAC bases as well. And I always got the impression was, because the Vietnam War, it hadn't gone very well in the Vietnam War. All the troops were out of Southeast Asia, and there may have been some sort of idea by high-level officials that if the Russians go to take South Korea or the Philippines or Indonesia, we may have to use the nukes. And that may be why there was so many nuclear stories in 1975, because mine was they put in this nuclear missile base in February of 1975. That's when the sighting started, and they made a contract with the Russians, a treaty to take out this 100 new missiles, because North Dakota had 400 nuclear missiles, and these sites all over the place. And in November, that's when it stopped, was when they made this treaty and started taking the missiles out. So it was like this direct correlation. And so 75 is critically important. That's when Travis, so if you look at Travis Walton's story,
That's right.
Travis Walton's story took place right in the middle of these incidents, these incursions were in late October, November of 1975. And that's when they took Travis right in the middle of those nuclear incursions at the SAC bases.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. So let's go to the 77. This is when they wake you up. So let's go to 77 and tell me the story about you and Toby and what happens there.
Sure. Toby and I made this camping trip. I had a new camera. I wanted to use it. I mean, I don't know why I felt so compelled to go on this trip. Because I didn't initially, but within 48 hours, it's all I could think of. And, you know, we obsessed about it. We planned, we put all our stuff together, and, you know, we approached things. We kind of had the reputation of being the nerds in the squadron, you know. And so, you know, we approached it the same way we approach everything else. So, you know, in writing, we make a list, we get maps, went to the library and looked for books on camping, couldn't find anything. And as well prepared as we thought we were, there were just a series of just really strange missteps that occurred. For one thing, I bought some infrared film, some really cool black and white film, because I had a little dark room set up to develop my own prints.
Wow.
I left my camera bag on my kitchen counter.
And why did you have infrared film? We used infrared in 75. Why were you using infrared film? Because we were shooting these objects. We were trying to photograph them. We had infrared film.
Because a friend of mine told me that you could do that. I mean, it's the same developing process as black and white film. So.
But you weren't anticipating seeing a UFO, were you?
No, absolutely not. I bought it because the infrared film, you took pictures of, say, like a scenery, trees. When you develop them in infrared, they come up, they look like they have snow on them.
Oh, okay, okay.
And the effects are just kind of neat. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we drove down 6.5 hours, even though there's, you know, half a dozen nice parks less than an hour away.
Yeah.
There's we drove in to Devil's Den State Park, and we had agreed on the way down that we would not stay in the campground, because we didn't want people right next to us, to the left of us. You know, Toby wanted to watch the night sky. He didn't want light pollution.
As they said before, you didn't want to be in a Walmart parking lot.
That's exactly right.
That's good. Okay.
So we drove, or I drove, and we came to a chain across the road with a pretty sternly worded "keep out" warning on it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we got to turn around. My friend Toby's like, "No, man, wait a minute." And he hops out of the car, and what they had done is they had taken this chain and put a padlock on it to form a noose, and just draped it around the post on the opposite side of the road. So he gets out, picks up this chain and drops it, and like, woohoo, we're in. You know? And you know, we felt like Lewis and Clark, you know.
Okay.
And we could see a plateau off in the distance. And, you know, I just got those photographs were given to me by Amazing Legends. The guys that did Amazing Legends, they took the information from my book and went on Google Earth and looked for something that would match the description. Okay. I never did that because I assumed that the top of this thing that I refer to as a meadow would have been overgrown with 40-year-old mature trees by now.
Yeah, interesting.
It's not. It's and it's not horseshoe shaped as I described it in the book, at least now. Now it's kind of a triangle.
Yeah. And it's almost like it's being maintained. Is that what you thought it was? It was like somebody's maintaining it, or it just doesn't grow? No,
someone is absolutely cutting that grass.
Yeah.
You know, there's one road that goes up to that plateau, one dirt gravel road.
Wow.
And somebody on a regular basis goes up there with a tractor and cuts the grass and keeps the trees from growing.
Interesting.
So, And they've done that, I guess, for 40 years. And that is curious.
Yeah.
Why groom this meadow in the middle of nowhere? So we were awestruck by the place. It was absolutely gorgeous. We were pretty high above. We could see the tree tops. So we were on this plateau.
Okay.
And it was just gorgeous. And we set up camp off to our right. And I'll kind of cut through a bunch of stuff and get to what's really relative.
Yeah.
But we did the fun stuff. Took a hike, barbecued some hot dogs and all this stuff. And it's getting later in the evening, and we have a tent, cheap tent we bought, Kmart tent, and we had a campfire. And I was on one side on an air mattress, and Toby was on the other side on his air mattress. And we're just chatting. We're just, shooting the breeze. And I remember saying, man, I could understand how people could like this. This is really very pleasant. Because it was. We had fun.
Yeah.
So, he boasts and says, yeah, I told you. And I knew it would be fun. And we're laughing and joking around. And just a few minutes later, and this sounds so cliche, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I say it because it's true. In a lull in our conversation, the sounds of the forest stopped. The crickets, the tree frogs, we even lost the breeze that we had. We had a nice gentle breeze, and that went away. And the stillness unnerved me. Had I been there by myself, I'd have been gone.
Yeah.
And I asked my friend, like he's going to know, hey, is this normal? It's still out here. And he's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. He says, look, we've been loud, we've been laughing and cutting up. They'll be back. Just watch, they'll be back. They didn't come back.
Yeah. And of course, now that's sort of a pattern where you sort of get moved into this other reality or whatever's going on. That people describe this all the time.
It really was like a shift. I wonder if it was an interdimensional thing. It felt artificial. I remember looking at a tree in back of our tent that was illuminated by the campfire, and it wasn't moving. I mean, the leaves on the tree didn't move. Yeah. And that, to me, was unnerving.
And the other thing, I don't know, you probably know Chris Bledsoe, correct?
I do.
Yeah. And his story with John Alexander, and it's the idea where he's with John Alexander, and then he's sitting there and he says, the crickets all stop everything, and he said, John, they're here. And John said, what do you mean they're here? And he said, they're here. I just know. It's like you become sensitive, like once you've been on the ship or touched the ship or something like that, you become sensitive to the vibration and you pick it up before they actually show up. So that's what he was saying. And then John's saying, what do you mean? And then this thing appears and goes flying off. And John was so blown away. How did he know it was coming? And it was exactly what you're describing. It's almost like you're sensitive to their existence and that they're there, but you can't see them yet. And all this is sort of moving into a different whatever is going on.
Yeah, that's a very good way of saying it.
Yeah.
And at this time, my friend has his head turned to his left. And I'm about to ask him, hey, what are you looking at? And he says to me, hey, Terry, were those lights there before? Cliche, right? I know, but that's what happened. And I can't see from where I'm sitting because his torso is in the way. So I kind of half stand up and take a step back. And on the horizon, there were 3 little stars in a tightly packed little triangle. And they were sitting on the horizon. And they were too far above the horizon to have been lights like from a parking lot or a train or something. But they were absolutely stationary. So we weren't sure if it was an aircraft or not. We thought maybe it's an aircraft. We didn't know if any that had that kind of light configuration, but maybe it was an aircraft and maybe it was headed directly for us. And that's why it looked immobile. But we're watching it. And as we're watching it, it rotated and did about a 320-degree turn. What it did was it oriented itself with the base of the triangle parallel with the horizon.
Wow.
And then as soon as it did that, it started to ascend. And that's when I felt this feeling of calm wash over me. And I would describe it as mild sedation. It's very similar to what I felt when I was 11.
Okay.
It was a distinct feeling of, almost being more of a spectator than a participant. Kind of like we were removed. I struggle for words, but
yeah.
So we're watching this thing, and it's an inappropriate response by us. I mean, we're not discussing it. We're not talking. We're just quiet. I mean, there's not a word said between us, and we're just watching this thing. And it was cool to watch because it ascended to a high point, I guess a ceiling, and then started to descend, and it was moving faster because it was getting bigger, and we saw the points of light expand, always equidistant to one another, but they expanded, and we saw there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was passing fields of stars, and they would blink out as the thing went past them because it was a solid object, not three objects moving in unison.
Yeah.
And we saw it tumble. I saw it tumble. I know Toby did too, where it would do this head over heels thing, which I thought was really interesting.
Wow.
And it got bigger, and eventually it was, headed right for us. We watched there was just a trillion stars out that night, and there was just a little bit of starlight, but enough for it to have kind of a blurry dark shadow on the treetops as it flew over, and it parked. We were off the side of the tree line. So this thing parked and filled up this entire meadow. And it was at about 3,000 feet. And we sat there and just looked at this thing. And while we're looking at it, that's when from underneath this thing somewhere, this beam of light came. Okay. Similar to what you mailed me.
Yeah, I sent you a couple of photographs, and of Chicago, there were some taken of these beams. You said it was the ones I showed you looked like they were maybe a foot and a half across. But yours, you said, was a bit thinner, right?
They were. They were no larger than a softball. We only saw one single light beam.
Yeah. And it was uniform all the way down, like Chris Bledsoe showed me the first one, 2015. One of those ones I sent you was Chris Bledsoe sending me that beam. But we didn't start big and go into small. It was almost like a tunnel, correct, or like a shaft or whatever.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
that's when the beings came later, right?
Beings come later. Yeah, okay. I'll get to those. So this white beam landed in the middle of the campfire and just stayed there for maybe a minute and a half, and then just like someone hit a switch, it turned off. And then there was a purplish, reddish, I'm a little bit colorblind, but I got the idea, a laser beam about the diameter of a pencil that came from the same spot underneath. And it would land at a spot in our campsite for like 1/10 of a second, disappear, and then reappear in another place. So it was moving around like 10 times a second, like some kind of weird light show. I mean, I'd only seen lasers on television at this time, 1977.
And there was no fear now at this point, right? You're just observing this?
No fear whatsoever. That feeling of calm that I mentioned, we were in that zone. That's the best way I can describe it. And this thing, I remember having the thought, this thing's checking us out. It's scanning us. And I don't know where that came from, but I think that's probably correct. Yeah. It struck me in the chest a couple times. I never felt a thing. I know that it struck my friend Toby.
Wow.
Hit our car, hit our tent, hit our campfire, just kind of like all over, like it was mapping or something.
And it went on for how long, this other purple beam thing?
About 3 minutes.
Okay.
That turns off, and then it's dead silence, and we're sitting there. That's when Toby stood up and said, "Show's over." And I was sleepy. As soon as he said that, I could feel I wasn't tired. I mean, I was tired, rightfully so, but you got to remember, we worked the midnight shift for 3 years, and this was, mid-afternoon to us. I mean, it wasn't, we shouldn't have been that sleepy, not at our age. But
it's almost like a replay of the 11-year-old thing where you suddenly get tired. It's like they want you to go to bed. Like, okay, get out of here, go to bed.
It's exactly what it felt like.
Yeah.
So Toby threw his sleeping bag in, or his air mattress, and fell on top of it, and I followed suit. I didn't remove my boots or my shirt, and that would be important later. But as soon as my head hit the pillow, I was out. And some hours, 4.5, maybe 5 hours later, I wake up because there are this flood of lights, just like in my room when I was 11. Multicolored lights flashing through the canvas of the tent at odd intervals, and they were yellow and greenish, white, and they would light up that tent like a ballpark at night. And I'm kind of, I don't have my wits about me. And I'm like confused for a moment. Where am I? Oh, yeah, we're camping. That's right. So I saw these lights, and I'm thinking those must be the overhead lights of a park ranger there to kick us out. Made sense, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I noticed my boots were unlaced almost all the way down. And, one of the things they drive into you is take care of your feet when you're in the military. If you can't walk, somebody's probably going to have to help you, and you're going to be of no help, no worth.
Okay.
So I couldn't understand that. I took my boots off. My socks were on sideways too.
Wow. There you
And
go.
that really, really troubled me. And I put them on correctly, laced them up. And that's when Toby caught my attention. He's on his knees. He's looking out a flap on his tent. And I'm like, man, what are you looking at? What's out there? Is it park rangers? And he said, no. And he did the universal finger across your lips thing to be quiet. And we whispered back and forth a little bit, but I noticed in a flash of light that he had been crying. He had tear tracks down the right side of his face. And that upset me. That's the point where all that sedation, all of that feeling of calm, that was all gone. That was all out the window. I was scared to death. I was scared to death. And I got on my knees and I pulled back my flap in the tent about 2 inches because I don't know what's out there. And I saw two things. First, this thing that had been 3,000 feet over our heads had descended, and now it's about 30 feet over us.
Wow.
And the second thing was, I saw what I first thought to be children, maybe a dozen or 15. I didn't count them, but they were paired up in 2s and 3s, and they're walking around all over this meadow. And they walked with a weird, distinctive gait. They walked almost like their knees were hinged to go backward a little bit with every step. It was an unusual gait. And I asked my friend Toby, I said, Toby, what are these little kids doing out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night? And he said, look at them again, Terry. Those ain't no little kids. They're not human beings. And he was right. When I looked close, they were not. I mean, their heads were disproportionate to their torso, the spindly bodies.
You'd call them grays?
Yes.
And were they doing anything? Because this goes back to this thing about when they fly by and they're just not really doing anything. Were they doing anything or just sort of walking around?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. They were like tourists. They weren't looking down or looking up. They weren't searching for anything, but they were in little, like I said, 2s and 3s. I didn't hear any communication. I didn't hear any verbal from them. Yeah. But they're walking around and just kind of checking out They did. They reminded me of tourists. Then a light came out of this triangle thing. And this light is about maybe 25 feet in diameter. It's a little bit shorter in diameter than the craft is tall. The craft is now 30 feet over our heads. And this is the same quality of white light that's in those beams.
And this again is like a beam type light coming down?
It is. It's like someone flipped the switch and
25 feet across?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this thing, each leg of the triangle, I estimated to be a city block in length.
Wow.
It was huge. And
Okay.
So these little guys would walk into this light, and when they did, they dissolved.
Okay.
And you can picture that, I'm sure.
Yep.
We watched until the last two dissolved, and as soon as they were gone, the light turned off, and there had been also a noise, a droning noise, not real loud, but that stopped too.
Okay.
And the lights, we could only see two lights, but those lights shifted from multicolored to a single white light that went up and down like a what I call it a light bar that was on the apex, on the point of each triangle. And I remember thinking, I bet that's what makes it look like a star twinkling when it's in the sky. And I still think that's probably so. So when we watched, it took off, and it didn't take off like a rocket ship. It lifted off like a hot air balloon, slowly, and did a turn, and then continued to climb. And I think that the higher it got, the faster it went. And it reached the point where, you know, there are 3 dots of light again that look like stars, and then 1 dot, and then it was gone. And we sat there, you know, for probably 30 minutes, and it doesn't make sense, but I didn't want to leave the tent because it's just a piece of canvas over my head. But, you know, I felt like I had cover, you know. I thought to run from there to the car, I'm going to be vulnerable. And, you know, to this day, I avoid open spaces. I will walk a mile around my...
You said, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but you and Toby aren't talking during this 30-minute period of time, are you?
No, he's hyperventilating.
Okay.
And I think the only thing I said was, man, you got to get control of your breathing.
Wow.
And he finally did. And he was the one actually that said, look, we got to get out of here. Grab your keys and let's just go. And I said, you know, it's pitch dark out there. Are you sure you can navigate me out of this place without breaking an axle or something? Yeah. And he says, yeah, I got this. Trust me, I got this. And we ran to the car and left. And we were incredibly thirsty. Found out later we were acutely dehydrated. And we headed back to Whiteman Air Force Base. And
Terry, can I ask you a question real quick?
yeah, sure.
At that part when you guys are peeking out of the tent and you said they were in 2s and 3s and looking around, did you notice that any of them noticed you? I mean, no eye contact was made, or they didn't glance over like, hey, what's this tent? You know?
Well, yeah, well, we weren't right next to them. You know, we're parked over by the tree line, and these little guys are more or less in the middle of the meadow. So there's a fair amount of distance between us. But that was our fear. Our fear was, so we're just, I mean, peeking out and, you know, trying not to make any noise. And yeah, we were scared to death that they would just
Right.
squirt around.
I've been in situations like that where you're hiding in a tent and you even think, what am I doing in here? Like, there's just nothing you can do.
That's right.
Silly. Thank you.
Sure. Dyatlov Pass, right?
Right.
Let's take the little 4-minute break right now, and then we'll get to when you get back with what happens in the hospital when you head back, because that's and I've got a couple of these weird questions. Then I'll let Nicole ask questions if she wants to.
I've been writing. That was.
Okay, welcome back. I have Terry Lovelace here, and we're going to get to the interesting part of the story now. They're coming back, him and Toby are coming back from this incident with the UFO up on this plateau. And so take it from there, Terry. You have some physical problems now. And so can you get into that? And then we'll get into what do you recall happened on the ship, and what did Toby say?
Yes. I'll get to all of that. I'll skip around a little bit to do it, but we can cover it.
Yeah.
You know, we had that long 6.5-hour drive ahead of us. Both of us were bone tired. And we were incredibly thirsty. When we got back to the base, our wives took us to the hospital. Both of us, I had over 103 temperature. My wife took my temperature, and I had this sunburn, this crazy sunburn all over me. Every square inch of my body. I mean, under my arms, the soles of my feet. I mean, everywhere was burned. It never peeled and it never blistered, but I had this red sunburn. The painful thing was to my eyes. I had what the doctors called a flash burn. It's what an arc welder would get if they didn't, you know, use the hood. Basically, it's a sunburn to the cornea of your eye, and it's painful. Feels like you have sand in your eyes. It's just And it also
I'll just add something at this point. You realize that Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they have the sunburn, right? With the incident where he's chasing it in the truck and he looks up at the thing, and then he's got the sunburn all over his face and stuff like that. So there. And the other one that reported the sunburn is, if you follow Mission Rama people, their 6-toe pause goes into a Zendra, they open this Zender and he goes in and he goes to the planet Ganymede, and there's witnesses that report when he comes back out, he's stumbling around and he's got this sunburn thing on. And I had, in 76, I had these two women who had, they were both principals. They were very hard to come out because they didn't want to expose themselves. They had the same thing. They were looking up. The one was looking out of the car, was above them, and she had the same eye damage that you reported. So
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So you have these injuries, and Toby does he have the sunburn as well?
Toby's African American,
Okay.
but he was burnt. I mean, it's the first time he had that experience, and he hurt all over. You know, I think that whatever they did to me, they gave him a double measure because he was sick. I mean, he was really sick. There's no way he could have drove a car. I had this old Chevy with a great big bench seat in the front and in the back too. And I suggested, hey man, why don't you go crash in the back seat? You'd be more comfortable. And he muttered something like, I'm not moving. He was curled up. He was a short guy. He wasn't a great big guy. Yeah. He's curled up into a fetal position on the seat. And he's just miserable. And when the sun come up, the sun finally rose, I was miserable because it hurt my eyes so badly. So we got to base. Our wives took us to the hospital. Here's where things get strange. They separated us. And after I have probably the most thorough medical examination of my life, mostly with my eyes closed because I'm so photophobic, the base commander, the hospital commander, and two guys in casual civilian clothes who I don't know came into the room, and they asked the doctor to excuse himself, and the doctor shut the door on the way out. And the hospital commander, who I knew well, was the only one that spoke. And he was very formal. And he said, Sergeant Lovelace, you're to have no contact with Sergeant Tobias. That means you won't speak to him. You won't send him letters. You won't try to communicate with him through a third party. If you're in the base exchange and you run into one another at the frozen pea aisle, you're going to turn around and walk the other way. And on and on and on. And he said, you know, and this is an order. Do you understand me? There'll be consequences if you don't obey this order. And I said, yes, sir, I understand. I'm like, I didn't understand. But the curious thing is, there was a change. When we left that plateau, there was a change in me, and I suspect in Toby as well. Well, this guy was my best friend in the world, you know. Suddenly, I wanted nothing to do with the guy. And I don't know where that came from. I can't reconcile that to this day. But I had almost disdain for the guy, and it was just uncharacteristic of me. And
looking back on this incident with the people coming into the room, do you think that they knew immediately because of your injuries what had happened? Because if you remember the Rendlesham Forest, they were shipping guys out there as well, where they moved guys out immediately to separate them so they couldn't really talk about what had happened.
Yeah, and that's what they did with Toby.
Looking back, do you think that may have been a possibility that they understood immediately what had happened? Because otherwise, why would military people come in, separate you? It's almost like they knew what had happened.
Yeah, and you know, let me tell you my theory on that is we should have put that chain back up. I suspect that, and we left everything at the campsite. You know, Toby left his backpack with everything in it. I left, tent. I took my wallet, my keys. That was it. We were just glad to get out of there. So with that chain down, I'm sure park rangers figured somebody must have trespassed and drove into the park and found our little campsite. And I suspect that because Toby's name and address, we both lived in NCO housing on the base. They knew we were from Whiteman Air Force Base, and then they called, and that's probably how the whole chain of knowing began. But it was something a little more interesting. You know, he gives me the no contact order, and I got settled down. They gave me a private room. I assume they did the same for Toby. And that was unusual. You know, enlisted men would normally be on a ward. So that told me I was either very ill or, you know, I was being segregated for some reason. But yeah, Toby got orders cut for Japan. I mean, like at light speed, he was gone. And actually, they didn't let me even work at the hospital, so we wouldn't run into each other at the hospital. They
took you out of the hospital, is that right?
Yeah, they had me working for a supply unit.
Oh.
And that was...
So you never did really talk to Toby about what had happened, other than he made that comment about they had heard us. Other than that, did you ever get anything out of him as to what his impression was of what happened?
Well, kind of. I wanted to say, it was kind of a mixed emotion. I wanted nothing to do with the guy, but I felt an obligation to shake his hand and wish him well.
Yeah.
You know, and I asked my wife one day, we're coming home from the grocery store, they're packing. I can see that they're packing. There's a truck in the driveway. And I said, stop, I want to tell Toby goodbye. And my wife's scared. She's like, you know, don't mess with these OSI people. They scare me. And she stopped. I ran up to the door. Same door I'd walked through 100 times before.
Yeah.
Opened the door, announced, hey, anybody home? And Toby's wife walked past me and gave me a scowl. I mean, she gave me a dirty look and said, you're not supposed to be here. And I said, yeah, I know. I'm just here to say goodbye to Toby and you. And while we're having this exchange, Toby, who must have been in the bedroom, comes out around the corner down the hallway. And he is just a wreck. I mean, he is a train wreck. I mean, this is a guy that was extremely particular about his appearance. I mean, he always had his shoes shined, always had a crisply pressed uniform, always had a haircut, you know the type.
Yeah.
And I was a slob, but Toby was about 6 inches shorter than I am. And I went in and we had this awkward meeting. It wasn't like I thought it would be. You know, and I thought for a moment I should embrace this guy. That would be appropriate. And I didn't. And I held out my hand and we did this inelegant exchange of, you know, till we finally made a connection. And I shook his hand and I said, I just wanted to say goodbye and wish you well. And then he looked up at me and his eyes were bloodshot and I could smell liquor on his breath. And Toby was never a drinker. So that was extremely out of character for him. And he asked me, he said, it happened, didn't it, Terry? And I said, yes, my brother, it happened. You're not losing your mind. It really happened. And then he said, but why us? Why us, Terry? And I'm like, man, I don't have a clue. And I broke contact with his eyes and I'm looking down at my shoes and I just turned and left the house. So there's a lot more to Toby's story, but I probably don't have time to go into today. One thing I want to get in for sure while I can was while I was in the hospital, I spent 2 nights, 3 days in the hospital. And on the second night, the second evening that I was there, the nurse that gives me my shot for pain and sleep at night came in and 2 guys in blue business suits followed her in. And the guy, there was a short guy in his 50s, flat top haircut. And he says to her, he says, if that's going to sedate Sergeant Lovelace, it's going to have to wait. We're here to ask him some questions. And they showed her some credentials. Well, I couldn't see the credentials. And then he did something weird. He was rude to her and he said, and shut the door on your way out. And I didn't understand the reason for that. But in retrospect, it was all theater. I think it was all theater to intimidate me. And they succeeded. And they came over and pulled up a chair on either side of me, showed me their credentials. He put on some drugstore glasses and read me my rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which I did not understand at all. And he says, did you understand them or shall I read them again? I'm like, you know, I'm good, I'm good. And I asked this guy, I said, sir, am I in some kind of trouble? And he looks over, he was a major, and he looks over at the younger guy who's a captain. And they smile and start to giggle. I mean, they thought that was funny. And he said, he was from Mississippi, Alabama, somewhere, and had kind of a Calvin Parker-ish kind of accent. And he said, son, would we be here if you weren't in trouble? And then they had to laugh at that. And I'm about to throw up. You know, I was a pretty straight kid. I'd never been in trouble before. And he said, park rangers found your little campsite. And you know what? He says, the only thing I can think of is you left everything there. You were planning on coming back. And he said, you don't have a little marijuana plot growing on down there. Is that what you get? Is that what this is about? And I'm like, no, sir. No. We don't have any marijuana. We're not. Because in 1977, that would have been a very big deal. So we go back and forth. He had me sign some forms. One was an NDA, I'm sure, which I could care less about. I was under duress. Doesn't count. And the captain leaves. He winds up his intimidation session or interrogation, whatever it was. And the captain shuts the door on his way out. So it's just me and this major in the room. And he had turned the lights on when he walked in the room. And I said, sir, could you turn those out? My eyes really hurt. And he's like, can't work in the dark, son. Got to see what we're doing. But the guy reached over and turned the lights off and kind of dropped this tough guy affect on his face. And he got down next to my ear and he whispered, he said, son, I know, and you two knuckleheads stumbled onto something out there. And I think you know what I mean. And I didn't answer. I didn't know a way to answer him because, we had both agreed our story was we went camping, we got sick as dogs, went to bed, woke up sicker and came home. I'm not about to tell them I saw a UFO the size of Walmart and, end up in a psych ward. So
did you get the impression he knew what you had seen?
Absolutely. Because after he goes through this son, I know, thing, his next words are, all I want is your film. How many pictures did you take of it?
Yeah.
And that's how I knew he knew.
Wow.
I don't know how he knew, but he knew. And I had the reputation in the squadron for being a photographer. So
Okay.
I guess they made that assumption.
One question about the NDA. Did you ever go back and try to get your Air Force file in terms of recording what they were diagnosing you with, or whether these OSI guys had any files or anything like that? Because and did they debrief you when you left? Because you remember the Rendlesham Forest guys. Jim Pennison actually asked them about Rendlesham Forest when he's being debriefed to go out of there, and they said there's nothing classified about that at all. And then he said, I'm free to talk now. So did they talk to you about it when you left the Air Force, or did you ever try to get your Air Force file?
I did try to get my Air Force file. I finally got my Air Force medical records.
Okay.
And you can drive a truck through them. I mean, there are gaps. Like, it's just insane.
Because they had given you some pills, right? They had given you these weird pills that you're supposed to take. Did they tell you why they wanted you to take these pills?
No explanation at all. The bottle said that it was 118 tablets or whatever it was. I took 3 with each meal, and they sent an RN. I assume she was an RN to our house. She just showed up. We didn't know she was coming. 6:30 that evening, she said, "I'm here to do your evening pill count." Never once took my blood pressure. Never once asked me how I felt. She would sit down, do a pill count, write some stuff down, say, "See you tomorrow."
Wow.
So, but about the 4th day, I'm stupid. And my wife notices this thing changing me. I mean, I'm not myself. I can't find my keys. I can't find my wallet. I can't balance a checkbook. I'm watching cartoons all day. Something's wrong. And she said, I think those pills make you stupid. And that's when I got out my PDR, my physician desk reference, that before the internet, it had color plates of every capsule and tablet approved by FDA for formulary. And
Okay.
So I searched diligently, and that capsule wasn't in there. It was just a generic made capsule.
Wow.
So I stopped taking the pills. And I felt about 5 days later, about the 9th day, I felt much better. And I had 5 days left to go. And I wonder if Toby took all those pills, if it didn't have some kind of permanent effect on him.
Yeah, because he had a bad end, right? He didn't end up well.
He did not end up well. He didn't do well in the military. He and his wife separated. His wife moved back to the States and married a guy who was a long-haul truck driver.
Okay.
And she called my wife and said, "We're going to be traveling through Michigan. My husband's got a load to drop at Detroit and then on to somewhere east. I don't remember." And she said, "I'd like to see you guys again." And my wife is like, "Yeah, we'd love to see you." So that was arranged. And the last time I saw her, it was kind of tense, And she addressed that. She said, "Look, Toby told me that this camping trip was all your idea," which wasn't true, of course. Yeah, and her husband was a mess. And I think that when I was there, she blamed me for her husband's condition. But
right.
Over the years, she knew that I wasn't at fault here. So, but she told us that Toby was living back with his dad in Flint. I had his dad's phone number. And I called the dad, and he picked up the phone, and I told him who I was, and he knew who I was. Okay. And I said, "I'm trying to reconnect with my friend Toby." And he seemed a little bit flustered. And he said, you know, Toby's in and out. I see him now and then. Yeah, he stays here sometimes. I'll have him call you next time he comes over. And I said, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And that was it. So I never heard from the guy. So 6 months, 8 months roll around. It's Christmas time. I think I'll try again. I call and the number's disconnected.
Wow.
And
And later on, you try to check and you find out he's actually died, right?
I did find out that, but I had an interesting, and I'll make this quick. When I was practicing law in Lansing, Michigan, before I went to Samoa, I was working on a case that involved the FBI, and I got to know this FBI agent pretty well. And on Fridays, usually after work, we'd meet at the bar down the street and have a beer and kind of just decompress about the week. So he was about to retire. And I thought, you know, he's getting out of the FBI. Maybe he'll do me a favor. And I said, look, I'm trying to find this buddy of mine. Can you help me find my friend? And he said, yeah, sure, I can find anybody as long as you're not a fugitive. I guess that's FBI humor, you know? So I laughed so he knew that I got it. And he said, write down everything you know about this guy on a piece of paper for me. Everything. Description, pictures of him if you have it, everything. And I did, and I gave it to him. And a couple weeks later, he calls me up and says, meet me at the bar. I got some info on your buddy. I thought, great. And that was, I think, a Wednesday. And then a couple days later, I met him at the bar, and he was late. And when he walked in, you know, he had a somber look on his face. And I said, well, what's up with my friend? And he said, I hate to tell you, but your friend is dead. And I said, what do you mean he's dead? He's a relatively young man. And he says, no, it was an accident. He said, on Highway 94. He said, you know, these things happen, Terry, and, you know, you just got to live with it.
Wow.
And it never occurred to me that he lied to me, but he lied to me.
Wow.
I don't know why he lied to me, but he lied to me.
Wow.
And I discovered, when I went to write this book, I went to look up his obit. And I thought about going and visiting his gravesite.
Yeah.
So I found his obit, and he died September 4th, 2007.
Wow.
So he was alive all this time. We could have reconnected, but you know, I don't think they wanted us to reconnect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two people, you know, that bolster each other's story. I don't think they want that. So
Let's go to the ship. What do you and Toby recall on the ship? What happens there?
okay, I had bits and pieces, just flashes of being inside the ship. I wish I had a clear linear memory, but that's not what I had. I woke up, it just seemed like I woke up inside this ship, and it confused me because I wasn't sure where I was, because the inside of this thing was bigger than the outside.
Yeah, that's what I want to question you about. You said how big on the inside compared to the outside?
Much bigger, much bigger. So much more so that I'm not sure that I was in that craft, or did they take us somewhere?
Yeah, because you know the connection that I had an experiencer who, if we do a panel, I'll have him on the experience, where his being, whose name is Albie, takes him to the spirit world. And he reports going into this building with his mother. And as soon as he said, I went in the building, it was a little tiny, like a building. It was 10 times the size inside as outside. And I went, Terry Lovelace said the same thing. So did Chris Bledsoe. When I talked to Chris Bledsoe, he said the same thing.
I didn't know
And
that.
then I'm starting to look at, is there a connection between these two? Because you probably know that 37% of all experiencers have near-death experiences. And you report, we can get into this, that you can't wear a watch. You have all these kind of things for a year. Near-death experience people report exactly the same thing. Lights going out, can't wear watches. And then you start to wonder, the same as Whitley Strieber said, that when his wife reviewed the 200,000 letters, she came out and said, Whitley, whatever we're dealing with, it has something to do with death. There's this bizarre connection. And it doesn't make any sense that near-death experience, you can understand maybe you have a sort of a feel, but the near-death experience people have the same sort of phenomena where they can't touch electrical appliances, they can't wear watches. It's really weird. And they report the same thing that you did. That was the thing that interested me most about your story, was this idea that it's like 10 times the inside is outside. Then you start wondering, like, what's really going on here? Where are we really? Is this a real craft or is this something else?
Right, right. Well, I can tell you what it looked like.
Okay.
And what made it appear so huge was it was all open. There was like a big mezzanine. And it gave, I mean, it was like a football stadium. I mean, it was just crazy big. And there were walkways, different levels on the sides that went up at least 5 stories.
Wow.
Oh yeah, everything I saw was either white porcelain or stainless steel. I think the floor was gray.
Okay.
And I'm standing there. I'm aware that I'm awake, and I open my eyes. My eyes are the only thing I can move.
Okay.
And I'm frozen, very much like Calvin Parker.
Yeah.
And I have my clothing in my hand, and I could perceive Toby's next to me. And I heard a woman screaming, and she sounded like there was a pain scream. It wasn't, you know.
Yeah.
And that scared me. That scared me a lot.
Yeah.
And they took Toby, and I heard Toby scream. I heard him scream, "Oh my God, no!" And then they took me, and I was on like a moving sidewalk. I was moving, but I wasn't walking. I wasn't moving my feet. You know, I'm barefoot at this point, so I didn't feel anything under my foot move, but I'm moving.
Still
And
paralyzed?
Still paralyzed.
Okay.
I got to this room, and it was a white dome-shaped room with an exam table that looked porcelain. And they took my clothing from me and maneuvered me onto this table. And I recall that it was warm. And I thought, you know, that's odd. I don't think they'd go through trouble of warming it for me. And then I knew, you know, the truth was it was warm because there'd been human bodies there. I don't know how many, at least 2. So.
And we're talking grays here, or do you have a tall gray and a small gray, or just small grays? Or what
I did see a tall gray when I was frozen standing in the mezzanine of the ship.
Okay.
And there were a lot of the little gray guys running around. And I don't think the little gray guys, I don't think are living, I don't think they're sentient like you and I are. I think they're.
A lot of people describe it robotic type beings.
Yeah, I think they are.
Just eat worker bee type things. Okay.
Yeah, I think I called them worker bees in my book.
Yeah.
And I saw this guy, and he didn't have a gray complexion. He had a chalkish pink complexion.
Okay.
Weird. And but he had the same sparse hair, you know, just ears with a hole and not 2 nostrils, slit for a mouth. His eyes weren't exaggerated large like you see in the motion pictures. They were more like a pair of Ray-Bans that kind of wrapped around.
Okay.
And I'm watching this guy, and he carries himself with authority. I mean, I could tell this guy, you know, well, he's 6 foot tall, and he's obviously somebody.
Yeah.
And, I'm straining my eyes as far as I can to my left to get a good view of him. And just by happenstance, he turns his head at the same time, and we locked eyes. That was the most terrifying thing that happened to me in the whole experience. And being in that ship, this is what scared me the most. When we locked eyes, I felt this guy was in my head.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how to explain it other than he knew me, he knew my wife, he knew my secrets, my aspirations, and hopes, and disappointment. He knew everything about me.
Wow.
And all I got back from the eyes was just like raw intellect. You know, I use the analogy, and it's the best one I can think of. I got a dog who will put his head in my lap. And, you know, I'll pet him on the head, and he looks up at me with those big brown eyes. And, you know, we have this exchange, and he knows I'm the alpha. And we each know our respective roles. In this exchange with this pinkish guy, I felt like the dog in the equation.
Okay.
That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
And that scared me. So back on the table, I'm on the table, and they're doing something to my lower back, and it hurts. It hurts a lot, and I'm screaming. And what's odd is I can't hear myself scream.
Okay.
I would fill my lungs with air and scream as loud as I could, and I didn't hear anything. I can see, even though I'm in this, even though I'm lying down, you know, supine, I can see that there's this tall insectoid looking thing that's working on my back. maybe 7 foot tall, and it looked like a praying mantis. It had the triangular shaped head, the multifaceted eyes. And for some reason, I always picture this guy in a white lab coat. Now, I don't think he wore a white lab coat,
okay.
But the whole thing had a clinical feel to it.
Yeah, people report that. What were you thinking when you were seeing these beings? Did you sort of then put the UFO thing together and these are aliens and?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I sure did.
Yeah.
And actually that came when I saw the little guys in the meadow, and Toby said, look at them, they're not human beings. And that's when the reality struck me that, you know, this isn't from Boeing.
Good analogy. Yeah. Wow. So they're working on you, and what happens next? You have some communication with the guy where he gets upset with you, right?
Yeah, I'm screaming, and you know, I've had people tell me now these things don't act annoyed. That's not right. I had 2 people tell me that they have no emotions. They don't get angry. Well, evidently they don't know how truly annoying I can be. And it turned its head toward me and looked at me with the left eye, and I heard it with crystal clarity in my head. It was gender neutral. It had no accent or of any kind, but I heard a spoken word in my head, obviously annoyed, and it said, "Why are you screaming? Stop screaming. You know we don't hurt you. You know we take you back. Now stop screaming." And he tapped me on the forehead with a green digit, and I was out.
Wow. There's a similar story. I think you interviewed Sherry Wild with Doug, where Sherry talks about when they take her out of the car and when she has this encounter at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then she's resisting, and they say, "Sherry, do we have to go through this every time?" So anyway, it's like, is this the only encounter you have with these beings, or did you recall being inside the ship?
It's the only interaction I had with these beings that I can remember.
Yeah.
I did have in 2017 an interaction with a woman that appeared to be a hybrid woman. She looked, you know, my whole life, 2 things, just real quick. I had a spot on my knee. I was a runner for 40 years. And the spot on my knee would go completely numb every time I hit the 2-mile mark in my run.
Okay.
And the other thing was in addition to the other phobias that I had, I also felt for years, and still do to a small extent, uncomfortable around Asian women.
Okay.
And I don't know how to explain that. Well, in 2017, third week in October, 2017, I woke up seated in my living room. I almost left this out of the book because it's so hard for people to wrap their head around. And it just seems so fantastic that I could understand how people would be dismissive of it. But it's absolutely true. I saw this petite Asian woman sitting across from me with her legs crossed. She's in a non-threatening posture. And I open my eyes, and I'm seated in my usual chair. And I glance to the right, the alarms are set. I glance to my left, and I see the cat. Cat's not upset. And I wasn't upset. I had that feeling of calm again. I had the idea, you know, well, I could scream for my wife, and then I thought, you know what, they got that covered too. She's not going to hear me. And my first thought was, why are you here? Does this have something to do with the things in my leg? Because in 2012,
yeah, we should explain you've got implants there.
I do. If you go to my website, you can see the x-rays.
Okay.
So she said yes, and we communicated telepathically, and it was like second nature. Now, you know, I shouldn't say that because I had the thought, if this woman can read my mind, you know, what if I think of something to make her mad? And then I had the second thought was, what if I think of something inappropriate? Well, you know, I mean, it's like telling a group of 4th graders, don't think of elephants.
Yeah,
so, I mean, inappropriate things cross my mind. And I had no control over it. And I swear to God, she was embarrassed because I heard her say, "You can control your thoughts, Terry, just try."
Wow.
Now, I don't know if that's true or that was just said for my benefit at the moment.
Yeah.
But that did kind of allow me to refocus. And we talked. And I was thinking at the time, I had trouble. I could not get a cardiac clearance letter because of my heart problems to have the surgery to get the things removed from my leg. Nobody would touch me. Surgeons were eager to touch me, but they wouldn't do it without a cardiac clearance letter. It's a standard of care in this country.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a surgeon in Tijuana about going down and having it removed. And we were discussing chain of custody and how it had to work out and all the details. And this woman said, you can't have the thing above your leg taken out and you can't turn it over to terrestrial scientists.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yes. And she says, if you intend to do that, they'll come and they'll take it back from you.
Wow.
And
Is that about the time you were thinking of doing it?
yes.
Wouldn't you ever get the same sort of warning not to do it? It's like, so, and that's the thing. It's like it's a multiple thing. It's got like, looks like bones things.
Yeah, there are two objects actually. I have below my knee, I have a collection of bones. You can see them at terrylovelace.com. Collection of bones that are arranged in a floral pattern with a little piece of bone right in the center that looks like a flower.
Yeah.
And the radiologist was, he says, I've never seen muscle sprout in the middle of, bone tissue sprout in the middle of a muscle. Must arrange itself in a symmetrical pattern. The thing above my knee was very interesting. It was about the size of a fingernail with two wires attached. And I realized that the placement of that thing above my knee was directly over what I called the numb spot that I would experience whenever I'd hit the 2-mile mark in my run.
Wow.
So that was
strange that you were a jogger and yet you had what, triple bypass surgery?
Well, I was a jogger till 2005 when I had my first heart attack. And
That's
then
weird.
I had,
I'll have to stop jogging.
I wish I could run. I really do. I miss it. So that was the end of my running days, but I walk,
Yeah. And the Asian lady, how does she leave? How does that thing end?
We carried on a conversation, and she showed me some things. She showed me, and I think they're what people call gifts. I do.
Okay.
And I think she wanted to leave me with these memories that I didn't have.
Okay.
And I saw myself in the interrogation room with the OSI, and I didn't get to cover that, but that happened, where they gave me sodium amytal, which is a hypnotic, and did the progressive relaxation thing for hypnosis. And I resisted the hypnosis mentally.
Yeah.
Anyway, she showed me segments of that I did not remember.
Wow.
So.
And what was revealed there in terms of things that you didn't remember? Like,
I remember telling her she told me the story about the big ship.
okay.
Like 150 kilometers in length, 75 kilometers in height. It's too big, she said, to ever fly across the face of the moon.
Wow.
And this goes back. I had the thought, God, I wish she'd remove those glasses and the wig. She wore this cheap wig. I called her Betty because she looked like Betty Rubble from the Flintstones. She's got this thing, and it's a standard human wig, but it's too big for the bulbous back of her head.
Yeah.
So it's all askew, and but I no sooner had that thought, I wish she'd take that off, than she did. And,
wow.
And I recognized her, and she was familiar. Not only was she familiar, but I felt a very strong affection for her in a maternal way.
Yeah.
And
so when she took the wig off, did it look like a male? Are you sensing she's a female? At first, but once she takes the wig off, does she still sense to be a female, like the energy, or how are you determining that she's a?
Well, she's dressed in a feminine manner.
Okay.
She's sitting with her legs crossed in a
Okay.
feminine manner.
Okay.
I mean, from the neck up, there's nothing to indicate
Okay.
what gender she was. Just sparse hair, you know, a standard thing, wrap around eyes, 2 nostrils, slit for a mouth.
About how old would she be, do you think?
She had age to, you know, I'm glad you asked that. I recall this woman, and that's one of the things she shared with me, when I was like 4 and 5, being taken to some place like a playroom with these other kids that I didn't
Wow.
recognize. They weren't from the neighborhood. I didn't know them. And we would play, and Sue was like supervising us. And we played with these geometric forms. And
Wow.
I know it's strange.
That's so common though. I mean, sitting in a circle. Were you sitting in a circle?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty common. I can give you a lot of examples of that sort of thing. And she was like the supervisor or the trainer.
She was. And we had these blocks. I had a blue block that didn't weigh anything. I mean, it didn't float in the air, but it felt like it had no mass to it at all.
Okay.
And the purpose of the exercise was, while sitting cross-legged on the floor, to set it in front of us and try to move it.
Exactly.
And you've heard that before?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Sure. I'll give you some examples. I'll put you in contact with people who will tell you the exact same story. So it's almost like a telepathic thing, or like a telekinesis thing, where you're being trained as children. And
Yes.
sometimes the people will report they can only see the being from here down. They can't see the face. They can't look up as kids. They're in this circle and they're sort of looking down, levitating these blocks or moving blocks or whatever, but they can't see the face of the person that's doing the training.
Yeah,
So-
no, I could see her clearly. And,
Okay.
And I was frustrated. I remember in this memory that I was frustrated because I couldn't move the block, and then I did, and it flew across the room, and I got a lot of praise for that. When you did something right, she would praise us. And
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, let me get to another thing before, because Nicole may have questions. The one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I just sort of picked this up today, you talked about the 167 photos of helicopters.
Yeah.
And you got the UFOs in the shots. And I can tell you, I've got a friend, I'll put you in contact with Tony from London. I will give you contact with Jeff Sal in Wisconsin. Tony had the same thing. He had these helicopters that were like 75 feet up in London,
yes,
downtown
in
London. And
Wow.
then he started having these photographs with UFOs in the photograph with the helicopter.
Yes.
And so then you start wondering, like, if you haven't experienced the helicopter, and then you start wondering. So I put on Facebook at one point and I said, isn't this weird? And then people started sending me these photographs with all experiencers with helicopters with UFOs in them. And I said, has anybody got a low-flying helicopter without a UFO in it? And then I was really surprised. I was listening to one of your interviews today. You have a bunch as well with UFOs in the helicopter. So what do you make of these helicopters? And because, Chris Bledsoe has them, and almost every experiencer reports these low-flying helicopters. So what do you conclude over this whole bizarre thing with the UFOs appearing, the helicopters? What do you think is actually going on?
You know what? Honest to God, I don't have a clue. I mean, at first it was a joke between my wife and I. Oh yeah, they rerouted the traffic copter, right? And then I go out and I'm looking at these things, and they always came between 9 and 11 a.m. At that time of day, the way my house was situated, there was a large tree to the left and the morning sun would be to my right. So my field of view is limited to about 180 degrees. And these things, I could hear them, and they come out of the tree and circle around, go over my roof line. And I noticed there were no numbers of them. So, being a lawyer, I did what lawyers do. I look up the law under the FAA, the code for the helicopters must display an N number, like Nancy, followed by a sequence of numerals that designate that particular craft.
Yeah.
And these had nothing. And I saw 3 varieties. I had them identified by Dr. Bruce Solheim, teaches at Glendora College, Citrus College in California, who's a former helicopter pilot. And, there are Robinson R-44s and 22s. The other one is made by Airbus, that's commonly sold to police. And then the rest were all military and assorted military.
And this is right in Dallas? You're in Dallas?
I'm in Garland, which is a suburb of Dallas.
Okay.
And
And they're below the 500 feet? They're supposed to stay above 500 feet? They're below the 500 feet?
yeah, yeah. I mean, one time a helicopter was so low, and it was a military helicopter, and it had the door, the back door was open. I used to know helicopter, Air Force helicopter, I don't anymore. But anyway, the back door was open, but I could see the guy in the back seat was wearing a white helmet. And Bruce Solheim said that's very significant because civilian pilots don't wear helmets. They don't like them. They think they're a safety hazard. But military requires that they wear a helmet. So, and then I saw the pilots wearing helmets. You know, I was at first just taking pictures so I could blow them up and get the IN numbers off of them and find out who's harassing me, right? And then when I blew them up, that's when I discovered these UFOs in the background.
That's absolutely fine. It's weird. How many of the 167 would have had the UFOs in them? How many did you get?
Probably a dozen that are decent.
Wow.
I mean, I wish I could say 100. You know, if I took the time to put them up on a big monitor and, you know, look at them closely, I bet I'd find more.
You were going to do a PowerPoint presentation on this, right? Just a helicopter story?
I did. I did a PowerPoint presentation of that at UFOCon in San Francisco in February this year.
Oh, okay. For Lorian there.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that was very well received. Yes.
Wow. Let me ask you finally, and you can maybe take over the screen and show some photographs you got, but let me ask you, do you think, like I always ask experiences, do you believe you're on a mission? Do you believe your book, you got help with the book? Do you believe that they want this story out, that they want you to tell this story with the book, or what do you think's going on? Why this lifetime encounter? Why picking you? I think that's what Toby said. Why us? Why are they picking us?
Why us
Did you ever try to come to a conclusion as to what's going on?
You know, I think that they're here, they're real, they visit us. And I think for whatever reason, they choose people when they're very young. And, you know, it's just a part of your life. I mean, I've seen UFOs in the sky lots of times, you know, before we had phones with cameras in them to take photographs. And what's crazy is a couple times I'd see a saucer in the sky. I'd like tell my wife, look, she can never see them. She can never see them.
Yeah.
So at least now I can take a picture and show her. Well, see here, I told you. Yeah. But
yeah. It's an obsession. If you had to do it all over, would you still go through the experience?
I'm inclined to say no.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm at peace with where I'm at.
Yeah.
But no, I feel like somebody's lab rat in a way.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
And your next book, let me ask you about your next book. Have you got the title, and are you self-publishing this?
I am.
Okay.
And it's going to be Devil's Den 2. And it's going to have 2 chapters, a chapter about Toby and the whole string of misfortune that happened to him after this thing.
Okay.
In detail. And then what I did was I took, and the story of my cousin Gerald from Arkansas, who had the experience with the clowns the same time I was having the experience with the monkeys.
Wow. Is he still having experiences? Have you kept up with him in terms of his life story?
He committed suicide.
Oh, shoot. Sorry to hear.
Yeah. No, you know, I felt really sorry for this kid. His family was very religious, and they saw this as a spiritual problem. And they took the kid in front of the congregation and said, you know, well, you think bad thoughts, let's these demons in.
Oh,
That was just,
terrible.
that was terrible. Yeah.
Terrible. Okay.
So, real quick, the rest of my book is from the 1,340 emails I've received. I've pulled out probably 20 of the very best, and they're very good.
Beautiful.
And I've vetted them. I've talked to the people on the phone.
Yep.
They are what they
Beautiful.
say. Yeah.
So send us the details. I think we probably won't have this up within the next couple of weeks. So you said a month. So maybe we can put the link in there and we can help you move this thing, because it sounds pretty exciting, especially when you get, I know you get a lot of people that sort of open up to you and tell you stories that they would never have told anybody.
Yes. And it's cool because they all have the same first paragraph. They all have this apologetic disclaimer. Please don't think I'm crazy. I haven't been drinking. I don't do drugs. They always have that. And then they tell me these amazing stories.
Wow.
That's been very rewarding.
Okay, maybe you can take over the screen now and show us some your photos. If you go in the very middle of the screen, that yellow file folder there, share screen.
Share screen. I've got share screen.
Yeah, click on that, and it'll bring up your desktop, and then whatever's on your desktop, you can show.
Okay.
It'll say start share. There should be a little thing there, start share.
Oh, I see share at the right here.
Okay, there we go. Okay,
okay.
here comes your thing, and you just have to go to your.
And let me go to
Mac.
pictures.
Most people got the Macs.
Yes. Let's see if I can get these up. Oh, yeah. This is a gentleman from Dallas who's 80 years old. He looks much younger.
Wow.
He's an aeronautic engineer, retired.
Okay.
He saw this craft in 2008.
Yeah.
And just had an incredibly good story about it. This is Leslie Kane.
Oh yeah.
You know Leslie probably. This is when we were there. This is the view out of our window.
Wow.
From the 14th floor, and I looked at it and I'm like, wow. And then I look up and I could see a recessed lighting fixture.
Oh yeah.
Directly above the window.
Wow.
So it's not a UFO. It's
pretty interesting.
But it's interesting in a way that
yeah.
To know what it's not. This I wanted to get into real quick.
Yeah.
April 16th, 2019. I woke up at 5:55 a.m.
Okay.
in a sweat, and I could not catch my breath. I didn't have any chest pain, but I was absolutely out of breath. And I told my wife, I think I'm having some kind of cardiac event. And she called 911.
Okay.
Took my blood pressure. It was like 220 over 100.
Wow.
My pulse was tachycardic. I mean, it was at least 150. She couldn't count it. It was racing. And, I felt like I just run really, really hard, a sprint. So medics came, ambulance came, took me to the hospital. I know the drill, EKG, cardiac enzymes, and a chest x-ray.
Yeah.
And I'm there about 30 minutes, and my vital signs return to normal, and I feel okay. So cardiologist comes in and says, look, I can't find anything wrong with you, and I compared she was able, this was a civilian hospital, she was able to pull my EKG from the Veterans Administration Hospital, where I had seen my cardiologist, compared EKGs from less than a year ago, and there were no changes. And she says, but you might have had some kind of, bad rhythm or something, but
yeah.
I can't find any record of it. So that long story, they cut me loose after about 6 hours. And yeah. I went home and this iPhone I sleep in a t-shirt with a breast pocket. I sleep with this phone in my pocket, connected to a set of earbuds, and also connected to, because the battery's so bad, I have a light with an outlet on it on my bedside table.
Okay.
So I plug in the battery so it won't die. And I listen to meditative apps. Now, I've been doing this at night since the 1980s when I did it with a Sony Walkman.
Okay.
And it helps me sleep. It also keeps away the ambient noises of the night that freak me out so bad. So I went, after dinner that evening, I told my wife, I said, look, I'm going to go for a walk and get my heart rate up, because I usually went for a 1 mile walk in the evening. And I hit the sidewalk and I look at my health app, And it says that I climbed 6 floors at 5:24 a.m. That's 31 minutes before I woke up.
Yeah.
I was, to my best of my knowledge, sound asleep at 5:24 a.m.
Interesting.
Now, how do I get to the previous slide? Darn it.
Yeah, there. Yeah, you should have the arrows on each side. If you go to there's an arrow there. You just go
Oh,
down.
I see.
Yeah.
Nope. That's Jeff Kreipel.
That little step counter has given me an idea to try, Grant.
Yeah. We're a Fitbit. They have the same reaction. How do I get this thing to go to the right? How do I get...
The arrow is right there. You click on that arrow. Go up to the arrow. Right there. Oh, you skipped over it.
You know what? Our image is in the way there, so I can't see it.
Oh, just go down a little bit, and there should be an arrow there. Oh, hang on. There's the arrow. If you move up to the middle, up, right to the side. Oh, it just disappears when you get there.
Yeah, it does. Well, our images are in the way. Let me do that.
You can.
There we go.
And drag
I got it.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Success. Okay. This shows that according to T-Mobile, according to Apple, at between 5:23 and 5:24, the vertical axis is in 10-foot increments. So there are 6 increments, so that's 6 floors, 10 feet per floor. Between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m., I travel 60 feet up.
Wow.
I live in a Texas ranch house with no stair except the one on the threshold of the front door. I mean, I don't have any stairs.
Wow.
And you know what? If I do climb stairs with this app, which I have before, the bottom axis that goes from left to right is the measures passage of time. Well, I can't climb 60 feet in less than a minute. So normally, like if I'm in a parking garage or something, I got to walk 4 flights of stairs. You see a stair step like pattern where it'll register 10 feet and then 20 feet and then 30 feet.
Right.
So that's the normal readout that you get. So
Wow.
I had some type of event on.
Interesting.
And
So you still have stuff going on?
Evidently I do.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, just go down and there you go. Because we need to see the helicopter. That's the cool one. Oh, here we go.
Oh, the blood on my pillow. Well, I'll tell you about that some other time. But
Is that recent?
that's from a year ago.
Wow.
The I didn't have these organized. I'm sorry.
Okay. No.
There's some cool images coming up. If I could just get to them.
Terry, do you sometimes feel compelled to take photographs or video? And I mean, you might not necessarily see anything, but later when you look at the photos, that's when they appear.
Sure enough, that's happened many times.
That's interesting. I'm just starting to discover this myself. And it's like, why am I taking photos and videos? And then later I'll be like, oh, okay.
Have you looked at them close? You found some things?
I'm just starting to. I was part of that club that was pretty sure everything was dust balls or bugs flying by, but I've recently changed my mind with this sort of activity. And yeah, it's made me start to go back and analyze photos and videos that I've taken.
You know, I pay attention to those feelings. My intuition is through the roof. I listen to my intuition. This is Kilo 5. This is where we saw the black diamond shaped thing.
Yep.
That's the dome over the launch tube.
Yep.
And this little building is where the elevator is to take you down.
It's not operational anymore, though, eh?
No, 1994, I think they pulled them all out whenever they graduated from the Minutemen 2 to the Minutemen 3 series.
Okay.
And they're all up in Colorado, Montana now. Strange wounds I wake up with.
Wow. Wow.
been waking up with strange wounds for 40 years. Blood on the back of my pillowcase. Yeah, that's a common occurrence. I'll have a drop of blood right in back where my head is, but no blood on the my nostrils. There's Whitley.
Okay.
And this was when we were in South Dakota.
Oh yeah, okay.
Try to get to some UFOs for you here.
There's another wound. Is that yours?
Yeah, that's mine. I woke up with that. They never hurt. They usually have 3 puncture wounds around them. And it's perfectly, I mean, when it first appeared, it was perfectly square. This is a couple days later and it's starting to fade.
Wow. Have you had any strange healing encounters? Or there's Lou.
Lou, yeah.
Yeah, cool. What did he think of did you tell him your story?
Oh, yeah, I told him my story. He filmed me, not with a motion picture camera, nothing they can use on unidentified, but TTSA guys wanted my story just to record it.
Did he have any insight as to what he thought or similarity stories or anything?
You know, he didn't share anything with me like that. We had 2 weird experiences. That was that the battery in the camera dies. Kid goes out to the van, gets another battery pack, comes back in, puts a fresh one in, it dies.
Okay.
Happens 3 times. And Lou got to see a helicopter.
He got to see a helicopter when you were there? Like, did you have the UFO in it or?
Yeah, he was at my house. I showed him the pictures.
And then the black helicopter type thing shows up.
This was a green one. It was a green Army helicopter.
But a low flying, did you have the UFO in it?
We didn't see a UFO. It was low flying. We didn't get a picture of it. What happened was we went to a restaurant for lunch after he was done.
Okay.
And you'd have to blow this up considerably, but right here, there are 4 military jets that we were eating in a restaurant, and these things circled around us.
Wow.
It was a strange event.
Oh yeah.
Bill for my ambulance run. And my bill from Methodist Hospital. I include them because it documents the date that it took place, like April 16th, 2019.
It's a little cheaper in Canada.
Yeah, well, VA pays them anyway, so what the heck. Oh,
there's a helicopter.
Yeah, there's a helicopter. Most of these, if you blew them up, you'd find a helicopter in them.
A UFO in them, you mean? Yeah.
Helicopter or UFOs. I got a string of UFOs here I want to get to that are worth seeing.
And Desta, if you got to leave now, you can leave. We'll be finished in a couple of minutes, but
I'm coming up on them, I promise.
That's okay. No, because Nikki's taping.
I'm good. Don't worry.
Okay, and Nikki may have a question because I've sort of hogged the whole interview here.
Here we go.
Here we go. Now we come to.
This is when I left the hospital, April 16th. We're driving home.
Wow.
And I don't know if you can see if there's anything in this one or not. Nope, there's not. Let me get to the next one. Nope, other way.
Well, so that was an interesting day. It'd be good if you get a regression. You can go to that day too to see what happened there.
I plan to do that. My good friend is a psychiatrist, and he's eager to regress me.
Wow.
Now this thing is moving, and I'm getting a black smudge on the film. There you can see a black smudge.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to show you a much better photograph than that. We were getting gas, and these things, you can just see them as gray dots, but they were buzzing around all over the place. There's one right at the edge.
Wow.
Now, the next one, nope, that was a gas station. All you can see is smudge, nothing dramatic. There it is again. It was following us home.
These are cell phone cameras, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Now this,
Oh yeah.
how do I blow this up?
I don't have a Mac. I don't know.
If I can figure out how to blow this up, it's an amazing photograph.
Enhancing. No. Oh, on the right, the top left-hand side there's that little up
Slide?
above right there. Yeah, if you pull that up. Yeah, there you go.
Ah, there we go. That was a saucer.
Wow.
When we got home, that parked directly over our home.
That was April 16th as well?
April 16th. Silver on top, black underneath. That was that thing that we saw as a smudge. I could never get a picture of it because of the way it was moving.
Wow.
So it was stationary here.
It's almost like they're providing you stuff to show here.
You know,
Very interesting stories, that's for sure. I'm telling you.
I wonder sometimes.
You'll have to
really do.
stand down. I think you have to make it smaller before you can go back again.
Oh, you're right.
And then you can go back, yeah.
Yep. Oh, I dropped my bills off at the VA hospital the next day.
Wow.
Helicopter followed me from my house to the VA building and home.
Wow.
You know, I'll tell you, my wife and I laughed about this at first, this helicopter thing.
I guess your wife's getting used to it now.
No, we sold our house.
Wow.
Sold a house. We live kind of modestly. I like my little house. We sold our house and bought a possum. Yeah. I've got some more here. That's a helicopter, I'm pretty sure. That's an airplane. Oh, this is a book I found. Published in 1993.
Wow.
I'd never heard of the author, never heard of the guide. But he gives this little book is a history of black helicopters that goes back to the cattle mutilations that Linda Moulton Howe was studying.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. People will be checking that out for sure.
I'm not sure what that was.
It's kind of zooming in there. It's sort of like it comes into focus, almost like it's
Yeah,
coming out of a portal.
I might have a still photo of it.
So that was a video clip?
That was a video clip. Yeah.
Maybe you can send me that because that's kind of interesting. It almost looks like a portal thing where...
Yeah, well, I've seen that a lot. Strange things will pop into view and then pop out.
Yeah, because Chris Bledsoe describes that where he said that when he saw the UFO, there was two of them, and then the sky opened up like a zipper and the third one came out.
Yeah, he told me that. I remember. This is not a UFO. That is from the light.
Or a flare, whatever they call it.
Yeah, lens flare.
Yeah.
I wish I could get this to play. This, well, I'm not going to mess with it. Lots of helicopters.
Wow.
There's one hidden in the trees. I could hear it, but I couldn't see it. So I took a short video and there it is. And the iPhone doesn't do a real good job of letting you.
Yeah, that's always the case where it's not as good as what it looks like when you get on the camera.
Never. I tried using a telephoto lens, but they move, and because they move, I could not keep them in frame.
Yeah.
So I am coming up on these that are pretty weird and worth looking at. I don't know what that is. 3 pictures of it. One of them in here is a picture of a globe, a silver ball that I saw in the air, and looked to be about 3 feet in diameter, and followed me one day. I went out for gas and pick up lunch. It followed me out and followed me back.
Wow.
And I don't know what that was. I don't know what the propulsion system was. I don't know. I don't know. Oh yeah, here we go. This is getting to the interesting part. Come on. It's a bird. I don't remember this. This isn't lens flare. Remember I told you about the fighter jets that were circling the restaurant that my wife and I were in?
Yes.
We left our dinner in the middle to go outside and look at these things. This is not lens flare.
Wow. Okay.
This is the thing I think the planes were chasing.
Wow. Interesting.
Lens flare. Lens flare. Oh, here we go. We're getting to the part that that I think is just really cool. In this photograph here, you can see this thing. Let me try to blow this up. This thing
Oh yeah. Yeah.
was, I guess undulating is the correct word. It was like it was rotating, and I don't know what it is, but I got a couple pictures of it, and it was constantly moving, constantly changing form.
Wow. It's almost like the good old days with the three lights when you first saw.
You know what? I think there's something else in this photo too.
So how many photos would you have? Like, did you figure have anomalous stuff in them? 1,000 or more?
No, I wouldn't say 1,000.
Okay.
A bunch.
Okay.
I'd be hazarding a guess, but I guess probably 75.
Okay.
This is interesting. See this spot right here?
Okay.
See if I can get there.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's like a fleet. Whole bunch of them. Yeah.
Now,
That's pretty interesting.
I took this 10 minutes after I took that undulating thing.
Wow.
Now there's something else in this frame. There were like 3 things in this frame that were interesting. I think there's a disc in the sky too. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not the sun, not the moon.
Wow.
And then there's another one above it. It's as big as we can get. And then on the right side, yeah, it was a crazy day. It was a Saturday afternoon in a park full of people, and things are buzzing all over the sky. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's Lynn Filaire. That's a white airplane. Now, I want to mention the white airplane for a reason, and that is that in addition to, oh no, that's not a white airplane. That's,
Oh, there you go.
there we go. That's another shot of it. That's a better shot of it.
Wow,
You
that's
could see
something
the
else.
structure. You could see the structure there, and this
Wow.
thing was like rotating.
Interesting. That's the interesting photo.
And then this is a canister-shaped thing, and I don't have a clue what it is. If it's what I'm thinking of. Come on.
It's to the right, I think. Yeah. There it is. Wow.
Now, you know, it's distorted.
Yeah.
But it's not an airplane.
It may even have a field around it. It looks like some sort of energy field around it.
I've seen that. I've taken pictures of those before. You'll see, it looks like heat waves or something all around the object.
Are you on the TTSA app, the thing where you log in when they're trying to get people to put their photos so it all logs into one system?
I'm invited, but I've never done that.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably the best of the best.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, I got a lot of stuff I could point out to you that are, you know, dots in the sky and.
That should do it. Let's see if Nicole's got any questions before we shut down here.
Well, just right now, I was going to ask, Terry, you mentioned earlier that as a child, no, you didn't necessarily experience any paranormal activity, but with all these captures that you have of sightings and craft in the sky, do you ever experience anything in your home?
I do. Both poltergeistish type behavior. Matter of fact, I had a witness. I was at Roswell and July 4th, 2018, and I shared a table with Yvonne Smith.
Okay.
And we were going to go to lunch, and we both stood up at the same time. And I stepped away from our chairs, so we're in back of our chairs. And she had her purse, and a message popped up on her laptop, which was open. And she turned her head, and I turned my head and looked at the laptop. Now we're 1.5 feet away from the table. Nobody else is anywhere. And there's a bottle of water sitting next to her laptop. And this bottle of water goes bam. And I mean, it didn't go down like you'd done that. It slammed on the table. And we both looked at one another and we're like, well, you know, I have some, this may be, yeah.
I'm doing a book on apports and manifestations. You ever had anything drop out of the ceiling or stuff disappears and reappears someplace else?
Yeah, stuff disappeared. Yeah, that's happened to me a lot, all my life, actually. And it's not that it's misplaced either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's odd things. You know, my wife was missing she had this little collection of ceramic pictures,
Okay.
and one of them was missing. And it bugged her. I said, well, you know, it's not anything I'm interested in. I don't know where it's at. And, you know, I found it sitting on a shelf in the garage. And stuff like that happens. Pennies. I used to find pennies, and they were old pennies.
Okay.
30s, 40s. They were wheat pennies.
Okay. Yeah.
I used to find them occasionally in the house, and occasionally I'd be out walking and find them on the sidewalk.
Wow.
And I knew that they were from them because wheat pennies just don't.
Yeah.
This is an interesting thing. I don't know what the world was going on here. You asked me if I ever had the compulsion to get up and go outside and look at the sky.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got out of bed at 2 a.m., went outside and took this picture.
Wow.
Nice.
There's something up here darting around. And then I don't know what this is doing, but just a short video of it.
Wow. Very interesting. Wow. Yeah. That's pretty interesting.
What I'm finding with a few of my videos that I've gone through, and Grant, you'll think this is funny because it's almost like they give you every example of what it's not. I'll have, you know, the swooping like buzzard spinning around, or the bug that flies directly toward, and then the bird, and then it's like, and then here is the orb wisping off. So it's like you have everything to compare it to right there in the same video. And
Yeah.
Well, orb, when you said the word orb, that reminds me. I wasn't aware of this connection with the near-death experience thing, although
Mhm.
I did tell a lot of people that I've been feeling anxious since, June of last year, vague anxiety. And I spoke at a conference that may have been Contacted the Desert last year. And it was a pretty decent crowd. And I asked them, does anybody else feel this vague anxiety, like something big is about to happen?
Yeah.
And everybody's hand shot up. Everybody's
Yeah.
hand shot up.
Yeah.
And I made a friend in the NDE community who
Okay.
told me that that's common in the NDE community right now, that a lot of people have that sense of anxiety.
Yeah. I know Yvonne Smith wrote me and asked me whether the experiences I was talking to were getting that she was getting a lot of that.